Hello and welcome to Escaping Kasterborous, the podcast where we rewatch, reminisce and review everything Doctor Who from 2005 to present. My name is Rich and I'm joined by the Jagrafess of my life, Amy.
That's rude.
I was trying to think of a different thing to introduce you with.
So you went with Jagrafess.
I went with Jagrafess, the giant.
Thanks.
I'm joined by the giant blob in my ceiling.
You're such a bitch.
Amy. Welcome to Series 1, Episode 7, The Long Game.
What about it?
I'm playing a long game
For
right
God's
now
sake.
because I'm working out where to start. So, we finished off Dalek. Adam's on the TARDIS. We've already established that he's a prick and he's along for the ride. The Doctor, Rose, and Adam arrive on Satellite 5. There's so many goddamn space stations.
Platform 139.
Platform 1 in Episode 2. Satellite 5, Floor 139.
No, yeah, that's what I meant.
It's such a...
Shut
God,
up.
it's so confusing. It's so confusing. And we take a look over the Earth. I love how the Doctor tells Rose, this is what's happening. Now, go look cool. Go and show off to the biggest show-off we've probably ever met. Go and show off to him. And he passes out looking over the Earth, and there's that fantastic line, he's your boyfriend.
Not anymore, he isn't.
I love that the Doctor doesn't feel at all threatened by Adam in any sense, because the last week the Dalek says... what use are emotions if you will not save the woman you love? So even the Dalek has picked up on the idea that the Doctor he's falling in love with her.
Pretty well infatuated.
Yeah, and he looks at Adam and he's like, "You haven't got a chance in hell, mate.
Not a hope.
No way in hell are you gonna
Not
get
a sniff.
You're not gonna hit that, mate. So I'm just gonna continue taking the piss out of you." Yeah. And to be honest, it's the right thing to do because Adam is the main focus of this episode. That was broadcast on the 7th of May, 2005. Happy 10th birthday to us.
Yeah.
We were now 10. 10. I saw somebody in the comments actually, I think it was of last week, was saying, these guys were 9 watching Dalek? Oh my god. How young are you? We're 25, so...
Yes.
Yeah, we were quite young when Doctor Who first aired, so it was safe to say that the series did scare us a bit because we were so young. But yeah, we were 10, literally just turned 10 by the time this aired.
Yeah, for those of you interested, my birthday's the day before Rich's, so that works out quite well.
It's pretty good. So Adam is the main focus of this, and in fact, Adam was going to be the working title. Adam was the working title for this episode.
Right. That's
and
cool.
Originally, Russell T Davies wanted it to be sort of an episode focused around Adam experiencing the adventure. So kind of like how Rose, the episode 1, is focused on Rose's perspective of all this stuff happening. That was kind of the same thing for this. And he was going to portray the Doctor and Rose as almost scary characters. It was meant to show this more anxious side to Adam when he's well out of his depth. Even though he was working with alien tech with Henry Van Statten, he was going to be even further out of his depth. And some of that still carried over with just how overwhelmed Adam gets based on the fact that he faints, based on the fact that he's just saying, oh my god, a million times when he's offered a beef slush puppy.
Alien tech is a little bit different to actually being on an alien spaceship.
Yeah, it's true. But I think it's more in the future. And just seeing the Earth, there's a number of times that characters in Doctor Who see the Earth from above, seeing Bernard Cribbins see the Earth in the End of Time Part 2.
Breaks my heart.
Yeah,
so
seeing him see it all happen. See all of the Earth. It's quite an overwhelming thing, especially seeing it, 198,000 years in the future. What is it? Planet Earth, mega cities, 5 moons, population 96 billion.
Something like that. I was literally there is no way the Earth could hold that many people.
I'm intrigued as to whether, really, a scientific theory that in 198,000 years the Earth could gain 4 more moons.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. I'm not really sure that would be a thing.
You never know. It could happen.
Anything is possible.
And
damn us with our single moon.
we're so rubbish compared to Jupiter, man. Come on. So I think we start this week continuing our discussion about Adam, because we talked about him a lot last week.
Because he's just a bit of an arse.
He is. He's a dick. And last week I asked whether, like, you'd think this was the guy who, when he was at school, would hold himself leagues above everyone else because of his intellect. He would be he'd be that prefect who strutted about like he was the head teacher.
Yeah.
And this is that kind of realization of that. And I've always the motivations that Adam has in this episode I've always found really interesting. Apologies if you can hear the wind outside.
Yeah, it's very breezy.
I might be able to cut it out in post with some rather delicious noise reduction and stuff like that. But if you do hear gusts of wind, it's suddenly gotten really windy.
That's very
which is
windy.
Annoying. But the motivations of Adam I've always found interesting, because obviously being a genius, being a big know-it-all, you know, he loves the fact that he can turn around and say, "Look, I'm a genius." Just look at his conversation with Rose last week.
Absolutely.
When because in the course of this episode, obviously assuming you've all watched it, who's listening now, or you know it well enough.
Fingers crossed.
He's going through this episode trying to get into the computer and work out and discover more about human history based on that point, but what would be his future. Hence why he's looking at the history of the microprocessor from the 21st century to present day, which is obviously 200,000 years worth of history. And he says the microprocessor went redundant in 2019. Definitely hasn't.
Lot of jokes.
And he goes and gets himself chipped. He gets his whole brain thing.
Which is a whole weird sequence. I get, what's the word I'm looking for? Horrendously uncomfortable when this woman is like, "Oh, Adam, oh, chips, oh, I'm going to be really overtly sexual, even though I'm like twice your age, lol."
She is a bit seductive, isn't she?
She's very "Oh, it's very painless, I promise, company policy.
It seems to me that you have unlimited credit.
Ew.
Ooh.
Lean over you and talk around the side.
It is a bit weird. I think it's one of those things where I wonder if, like, she is in on it. Tamsin Greig, I think, pronunciation-wise, plays the nurse. Like, whether she's, like, behind it all, or she knows, like, the whole process, whether she's part of the whole, if we chip you, we can read your mind, therefore we're gonna sell it to you, like, big time. Whether she's part of the process, or whether she just gets off on people opening their heads.
Maybe that. Or she just works there. I mean,
or she just loves her job.
Strange, aren't they? Maybe she just absolutely adores cutting people's heads open. We're no kink shaming here. We're all good.
No, it's another, and he holds a goal. So, oh, Danny boy, indeed. That's it. The whole sequence of, like, seeing the brain, I never found that weird as a kid. The thing that I hated was when Adam goes to throw up and spits out. You are bang on. It is a kiwi and orange ice cube.
I thought it was. It looked. You could see the kiwi seeds, and I was like, "That looks strange." They're just frozen bits of kiwi.
It's the fact it's called the vomitomatic as well. And I'm when I was younger, I'm not great with it now, but I hate being sick. I hate
a lot of people do.
Seeing, hearing, or being sick. So having that happen in Doctor Who was like, no, I know he's not actually sick, but just the idea of it happening, I'm like, no.
It's one of the weirdest things, actually. You don't really see a lot from it.
No, in, like, TV now, it doesn't really bother me. In reality, I'm still not keen. But back then, I hated that bit. Literally, out of the entire episode, that's the one bit I hated. Seeing that, like, the charred body at the end, like, on floor 500, don't care.
No issue.
A guy spits out a green ice cube, and I'm there like, no! Get away from me! Oh, God.
Yeah, you don't really get a lot of vomit in Doctor Who, do you?
No, you don't. I think I'm trying to think if that's the only time
vomit I remember.
we see vomiting. Because we don't really have... I mean, you've got the sort of, I'm going to be sick, like, but you don't actually see it happen. Again, this was Russell, like, pushing the boundaries of those sorts of things. And so, we have the weird sequence, the weird, like, flirty sequence with this nurse. Did you say mama?
Yeah, I did.
Mama nurse. Put a hole in my head, mama.
Okay, we're on from this now.
I forgot where I am. And Adam obviously wants to translate this information and send it home because Rose gives him her phone that's been topped up. A term I've not heard in a very long time.
Oh, Jesus, yeah, credit and all that jazz.
Going to a cash point, putting 10 quid on my pay-as-you-go phone, put your phone number in the pin pad. Jesus.
I've never done that.
Did you not do that?
No,
did you have a pay-as-you-go phone?
Yeah, I did, but I think Mum just did it all over like the phone and stuff, like called the company and just topped it up by text or like topped it up that way.
Because I used to go to cash points and top up my phone like that. I think you can still do it, but you had to go because you put your card and PIN in, and then you chose how much it is, and then you put your phone number in, and then it will send you credit, and you get a text saying,
so weird.
You've put £10 on your phone. That's how I did it. I very rarely got my parents very rarely put credit on my phone.
Wow.
But because it was like, right,
you're a day younger than me.
Here's your phone. You're paying for it. And I was like, cool, I'm going to go to Asda Mobile and pay like 4p a text because 10p a text on Vodafone. Screw that.
Nah, no.
Anyway, segue back. Adam wants to send information home. He gets himself chipped, etc. And then he calls his family. He goes on the big spike. He gets the blue rubbish in his forehead, and he sends it back. The dog goes mental at the phone.
I love the addition of the dog. It makes it
anything with the dog in it plus 10 points.
Obviously, but like
10
it just kind of makes
points.
it more interesting, and that seemed to have something like reacting to it at the other end. Because if it was just kind of the phone, it's a little bit boring, isn't it? Really.
But what my sort of initial question is, which is a question for you, Amy, and also a question for the old social medias and or the comment section. Do you think that Adam was doing all of this stuff, A, to further himself so he can be a big know-it-all because he can then strut about like he's so good? Or is he pulling a Back to the Future or Back to the Future 2 and taking information home? Yeah, the sports almanac, taking information home with him so he can profit off it. Is he going to become the next Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, whatever?
Because what you got to remember is he's just lost his job at the
He never has a name. Never has a name.
We'll call it.
Yeah.
So I personally, that was what I felt he was doing, was taking it back to profit off it. So like the fact that he wanted to know about computers was probably so that he could invest in something before it happened. So like, you know, the micro transmitter goes out of date in 2019 or whatever, then he can sort of invest in whatever is coming up, or be the one to create it, since he's got like literally the whole of history at his fingertips. He can create it early and change history.
I think that's probably the better option, is actually invest in shares.
He just didn't realise that how much of an absolute moron he was being, because if you do that, then everything goes to crap.
Yeah. It's just seeing his face when Rose gives him the phone and the TARDIS key, and he says, I want to go sit on the deck, because he knows there's a computer there. The look on his face, he's such a smirky little git.
Oh, I know. And you look at him and you're just like, I know what you're doing. You're not fooling anyone, because he's like, I might just go and sit on the observation deck, you know, just to chill, just to do. No,
pretend I'm a resident of the year.
You just want to run away and go and do your little info spikes and whatever the bloody hell you want to do, because you're an absolute knob and no one likes you.
Yeah. And obviously all of this backfires because the editor, played by Simon Pegg, who we will get to, gets hold of all the information, gets hold of the TARDIS key. And that sequence at the end, I love the camera work right at the end of the episode, after the editor and the Jagrafess have been defeated and so on. And they've just got Eccleston walking like super close to the camera. And he's got a face like a slapped angry arse, and he's like charging towards Adam, and Adam's there going, I didn't do anything wrong, it's not my fault, actually it's your fault because you're in charge and you left me or whatever. And the Doctor just literally waltzes him out the TARDIS back home and goes, right, piss off.
Yeah, I love that bit, because it's like he's trying to act like nothing, like he didn't do anything. He stood by the TARDIS going, I'm all better now, I just needed some time to chill and think, and I'm going to act like I haven't just been the biggest arsehole on the planet.
He's going to curl his pigtails and go, I've been good, really.
I promise it wasn't me, even though you have every shred of evidence it was. And then the Doctor's just like, do you know what? Not having this. You can get in there and you can go home and you can absolutely get.
Yeah, I love the fact that we again, as I said, the Doctor doesn't like Adam anyway. and is like, I'm going to take the piss out of you like he does. He's your boyfriend, etc., etc. And then he starts clicking his fingers to open his head, and he just does it to piss him off.
I love it.
I love it.
And then Rose joins in. I think that's best, because she's like, all right, doctor, stop. And then she's just like, yeah. And then it's just like, sorry, couldn't resist.
Yeah, I had to do it. It's interesting, though, because some of the reviewers back in the day, the critics back in the day, weren't sure about just dumping Adam back in the 21st century at home if he's got this, year 200k tech in his head. And it's like, yeah, the doctor doesn't like him, but he's not going to go as far as to dump him. Like, as Adam says, I'm surprised he didn't chuck me out of an airlock. Like, the doctor's not going to,
he's not
kill
gonna,
the dude.
kill him.
No, it's not like the doctor imprisoning the family in series 3. Like, he's done wrong, but he's not...
Imprisoning the family?
At the end of Family of Blood and Human Nature, when he traps the girl in the mirror and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Like, he's not going to do that to Adam, because he knows what he's done. He fries his answer phone and just leaves him. And apparently some reviewers weren't sure about that. Yeah, and at the end of the day, like I said...
Because it's like, you know what? It's your own fault. Go and... You've made your bed. Lie in it.
Yeah, like, you've got this tech. You need to stay quiet, because if somebody sees it, they will dissect the hell out of you. So it's like, you've screwed yourself. If he got the... obviously, it was down to greed, and that's why it's interesting as to what he was going to do. Like... Obviously, in reference to Back to the Future 2, Marty very outright says to Doc in 2015, "Oh, what's wrong with making a few bucks on the side?" Like, he is doing it for profit. Whereas with Adam, you just don't know. He could be doing it for the money, but there's a part of me that thinks he's doing it for the fact that he then knows about it, and he can be the smartest guy in the world because
I suppose,
he can put himself on that plinth.
If you're the smartest guy in the world, but you've got nothing to prove by using it, then what would be, like, no one would believe you the smartest guy in the world. Like, if you turn around and was like, I know everything about history from now until the year 200,000, everyone's going to be like, what? What are you chatting? You're crazy. But the fact that he can then, like, make these historical sort of future advances, preemptively, then would make him the smartest guy in the world. So I suppose it's a bit of both, because if you just turn around and you're like, I know everything, who's gonna know, who's gonna care, who's gonna know? No one's gonna know except you, and you might think you might know that you're clever, but it just makes you a smug git, really, doesn't it? And nobody likes a smug git.
Interestingly, like, they were gonna make him a genius, but in the original pitches for this episode, originally Adam was gonna suffer from a disease. Undisclosed originally as to what it was, and originally he was going to take that chance to get information about the disease to help either treat it or even cure it. Like, if it's 200,000 years in the future, he can help himself. That was originally like the pitch for his motivation for doing all of this stuff in this episode. Apparently it was going to be arthritis.
Oh.
Like, he was going to have, like, serious arthritis, and they were going to cure him, or he was going to manage to cure himself with the information he got from there. But that was dropped.
Yeah, I can
see
why.
Because it could be a bit tasteless, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I do get it. Like, it's a sort of, well, like you said, it's a bit of a sort of difficult storyline to go down, because how do you not offend a lot of people? But I think the story works so much better with him just being an arrogant sod, because that's obviously, like, you wouldn't have that kind of, because if it had been a genuine accident and he'd been trying to, like, help himself in that sort of way, I don't think that it would have warranted the doctor being so angry. And then potentially you wouldn't have got the separation from Adam and let the doctor and Rose go off again by themselves. There would have obviously worked some way into it, but I think it just works better with him being so arrogant and thinking, yeah, I'm going to do all this, because it's like, you're not going to stay in the year 200,000 forever, mate. Like, you are going to have to go home. So what did you think was going to happen if you got all this surgery? Yeah. And him sort of being arrogant and putting the doctor and Rose in danger, I think just works out so much better for the progression of the story, because it's kind of like, oh, great, look who's dropped us in it. Like, if it was just the two of us here, we'd have just been no one, and we'd have been able to slip out without sort of being detected. But the fact that you're here and you've caused this issue for us means that we're probably going to die. Thank you.
But no, Russell T Davies created Adam to be this kind of character. He was going to be a bit more inept. I think the approach of him being an arrogant asshole has obviously, after the character was fleshed out, for Dalek, and obviously was going to continue on. Like, he was deliberately only going to be 2 episodes.
Yeah.
They deliberately went on that in that direction. But funnily enough, and I read about this a while ago, and I didn't realize this before. After the long game, Adam's story isn't over. For the 50th anniversary, there was a comic book line which featured Adam.
Weird.
But he was the bad guy.
Oh.
And he manages to get his hands on a vortex manipulator somehow.
Oh, of course.
And goes and kidnaps a load of the Doctor's companions because his mother died. And apparently, since the Doctor took away all the information that he'd sent home, apparently some of that information could have been helpful to save her. Which is obviously like an echo of that whole arthritis plotline.
Yeah.
And he allies himself with the Master.
What?
And he's with the 11th Doctor, because obviously 50th anniversary was going to be one of the Doctors, and it's the 11th Doctor that's it's sort of amidst all of this.
Yeah.
So Adam does technically come back.
Wow.
And I think he gives his life eventually. I think he realizes, like, because he aligns himself with the Master, and the Master's probably not got any plans to keep him. He obviously switches sides.
Probably not be so much of an arse.
Yeah, and I think the Doctors, because he tries to screw with all of the Doctors. They all kind of, or at least the Doctors that knew him, the 9th, 10th, 11th, and so on. Yeah. They actually sort of posthumously, like, validate him as something. Not a complete dickbag, but it's weird. Like, I mentioned this in a video, the books and the comics and the Big Finish stuff, they are canon.
Are they?
But they're just sort of never really mentioned, I think. Unlike things like, I guess, I say Star Wars, but obviously Disney just wiped out all the extended canon of Star Wars. Things like, the only real example I can think of is like Kingdom Hearts. You've got your 3 main games, and then they've released a billion others for like the DS, and they're really strangely titled, but they all play into the same narrative. And if you've not played everything, then Kingdom Hearts 3 will not make sense. You can't play 1, 2, and 3 and make a cohesive story.
I feel like Kingdom Hearts just doesn't make sense anyway.
I mean, it doesn't, but you need to play everything. And I think that's probably why the books and the comics and the Big Finish stuff doesn't always play into the TV series, because not everyone will have seen it. Because the number of Big Finish stuff, like I follow Big Finish on Twitter.
Oh god, yeah.
It's constant. It's amazing how much they turn out. And I'm thinking, how do you turn this stuff out so quickly?
I know.
Like, it's incredible.
Like, though, the difference with kind of like Kingdom Hearts and stuff is like you said, you wouldn't be able to play Kingdom Hearts 3 and understand the full story. Whereas with Doctor Who, you don't need all that extra stuff. Like, you can just follow the main TV series. Like, although the extra stuff, like the Big Finish stuff, is canon, it's canon for those who want more Who. It's not. It's like not, it's not compulsory canon. Yeah. Like, you can be invested in Doctor Who without Big Finish stuff, and I ain't having none of that gatekeeping rubbish that's like, oh, how big of a fan are you if you've not listened and read everything? Yeah. No, shut up.
Name every Big Finish story. But like, I mean, as we said last week, it's not exactly impossible for Big Finish to influence the series. As we said last week, Dalek was influenced by Jubilee, a 2003 Big Finish story, which I would quite like to listen to, mainly because it did inspire one of my favourite Who episodes of all time. But that's Adam. I think we should talk about.
We've spent 25 minutes talking about Adam.
Well, the thing is, as much as he's a dick, he's a really interesting character for only 2 episodes, and
I'm sorry.
He is like the main focus of this one, because otherwise you've then got the editor and the Jagrafess.
Yeah,
they're kind of background, aren't they?
I mean, other than whatever this woman's name was, I can't even remember her name.
Suki or Cathica?
No, the other one, Cathica. That's the one. Always sounds like catheter, which is not ideal. No, not what I meant, but sure, we'll go with cafetiere instead. Cathica is... I feel like she's actually more of a... It's weird, because I feel like I said, Adam is kind of the prominent role in this episode. The Doctor and Rose are almost like more background characters in this than like Suki and Cathica.
Yeah.
And obviously Adam, but I feel like the Doctor and Rose are in this episode as much as the Jagrafess and the editor. Does the editor have a name, or is he
No,
just
he's
the
just
editor?
called the editor.
So, okay, I'm going to call him Simon Pegg then for clarity. Like they're in the episode just as much as the Doctor and Rose are. And so it's kind of that. I think that's what makes this episode kind of a bit different, is the fact that you've got a much more evenly weighted distribution of like viewpoints between the characters. But because there's only like, I'd say maybe 4 groups of characters. You've got Adam on his own, Suki and Cathica, the Doctor and Rose, and Simon Pegg and the Jagrafess. So it's because it's not trying to, it's unlike cough, Orphan 55 cough, where they had about 80 million characters that they were trying to shove into an episode. This works because it's 4 different narratives, but they all relate to each other. So realistically, the only different narrative that you've got is Adam's, and even his comes back and links into the end. So like, despite the fact that he's just going off and being his little bell-endy self all over the place, he still links back to it in the like the grand scheme of things, because it's like, in Orphan 55 there was so much going on that you couldn't even work out what you were supposed to be feeling. But at least with this one, you were supposed to be angry at him, confused by Suki and Cathica, and then like obviously on the Doctor and Rose's side, and angry at Simon Pegg and the Jagrafess. So it's like, because it all works cohesively, it makes for a much better story. And I quite liked having Cathica as like the kind of the saviour of the day. Like I was kind of glad that the Doctor didn't just kind of do the usual Doctor thing of like exposition, oh my god, danger, exposition, oh my god, danger, whoa, save the day. Like it's just that sudden up sort of swing of like, oh my god, I've suddenly thought of a thing. Like in this one, the Doctor and Rose actually get captured, which I feel like is something that happens to Eccleston's Doctor a lot more than like Matt Smith's Doctor, for example, is very last 5 minutes of the episode saves the day.
I mean, that's just sort of very Moffat, really.
It's very Moffat.
That's a very Moffat thing.
But like, I quite enjoyed that she ended up being the one, because like, they get in the lift and Eccleston's like, oh, well, that's her gone. And it's like, oh, or is it? And I
think he kind of knows that it's like, if she wasn't fascinated as to what was going on, she'd have gone a long time ago. She'd have wandered off and just ignored them. Yeah,
she'd have just gone, nope, you're fiddling with stuff, I don't want to be involved, goodbye. Yeah. But the fact that the Doctor planted all this kind of stuff, ironically planted this stuff in her head, about like, oh, the pipes aren't working, oh, this is this, oh, look, I've broken into the system. And she was just kind of like, actually, you make a good point.
Yeah. And as you said, you're a journalist, like, you should be investigating these things. And I think that's the realisation that she has.
Hard to swallow pills.
Yeah. And obviously the editor being this middleman between the Jagrafess and the human race, he's installed 90 years ago, controlling the fourth great and bountiful human empire. But the only thing about that sort of approach to the human empire, and it's something that's more, it's down to, like, narrative, like, timing and fitting it into the episode, but also down to budget as well. The thing that I have a problem with this episode, and it does play up to the end of the series when we're 100 years later, the scale of everything just doesn't seem there. It's so small. The idea that, like, I mean, I know that it would be hard to represent planet Earth at this time with that kind of, I feel like when this says mega cities, I'm thinking like, layers, like floors to cities, almost like the Beast Below in Series 5, where you've got like England all ripped up and built on top of each other. Like, that's how I pictured that Earth. But
I mean, you can sort of see it. They do try and put it in when they're looking over the Earth. They have like that kind of CGI.
It's a very like metal-looking Earth. Yeah, it's more the idea that like this is a huge like a very almost naively oppressed society, and yet it doesn't feel like it because you're only seeing the top of the food chain.
Yeah, I mean, they'd have gone
I know it's something that we'll talk about when we get to the end of the series, but when you see like, oh, the antagonists of the last episode, they're going down to Earth and they're messing things up, but you see none of it. Like, you only see representations of it on a display, and it's like that takes that sort of threat and minimizes it. Because, like you said, the Jagrafess and the editor, they're part of the story, but they're not. They almost don't feel like the main antagonists. It feels like Adam is the main antagonist in this episode. They are just there. They're there to be the big threat, but the scale of the threat, the sheer scale of it, that is confined to in reality 2 floors of a massive space station.
That's what I was going to say. Like,
it.
if they'd have gone to any other floors, because the doctor says, like, oh, have you never been to any other floor? And she goes, no, I went down to floor 16 when I got my chip inserted, and then I've literally only ever been here. It's like, but so what the hell does the rest of the satellite do? I mean, obviously,
I think every floor is
out,
just the same, like the same layout. See, the beauty of that is they can just reuse the same set. They just color it differently. They paint it white for floor 16 and ice it up for floor 500.
Obviously, but I mean, like, in terms of, like, sort of canonically, like, what is the rest of Satellite 5? Is it all, like, on every floor? Is it journalists living, working, sleeping? Or is
I believe so.
what we've discovered Satellite 5 to be later on? Like, or is it just a satellite of nothing?
I think it is just this. I think it is just the. It's got to be just
a repetitive over and over
again. Floor
again.
16. Maybe the stuff below could be, I don't know, arrivals, and then every other floor, bar 500, is the same journalistic crap.
Yeah,
like, but it's the scale. Like I said, it's the idea that the human race across 1 million planets is being oppressed and shaped by this gigantic blob in the ceiling, but you don't see that.
Ironic. Sorry.
You don't see that. Like, it feels so narrow. You can just say you could sit in a room in a TV show and say, out there the world is on fire and people are dying. There's big, just channeling War of the Worlds. You got tripods milling about, blowing stuff up. But we're staying in here. You can't see it. You just need to believe it's out there. It kind of takes away that feeling that this is really
the feeling
happening.
Of grandeur.
Taking something like when I say like looking down at the earth, looking at this oppressed society, kind of like how it's mentioned by Linda at the end of the series, when it's like people just stay and watch TV all day. That's all we do. Like showing shots of that happening would maybe reinforce that idea. That take something we know to be fact. If they did like a cutaway on that episode, like they show when Cathica's showing all the channels, there's the Bad Wolf quote, Bad Wolf reference, I should say, when she's showing all the channels. The face of Bo is pregnant. If they showed like something, they showed like a fact of science, even 200,000 years in the future, there's a scientific fact that this water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, and yet you cut down to Earth and there's people sat in front of the TV and they're convinced that's not true because they've tweaked it a little bit. As the editor says, you change one word in one sentence and you can destabilize an economy. You can start a war and make an enemy out of nothing. If they showed that kind of thing being done, that would have maybe made that threat seem a bit more tangible from the Jagrafess. Yeah. It sounds so apt to say tweaking wording in things in
That's
the news.
That's what I meant by ironic.
It's an interesting parallel.
It's an interesting
to now.
episode. This is what I was going to say, because you look at it and you sort of think, oh, the sort of mighty beings in the sky, as it were, are controlling what we see on the TV, and it's political and it's the media. And I was just like, what does that tell you?
Yeah, it's very apt. We've got a big blob at the top of society.
No, I was just about to say something and now I can't remember what it was. Never mind, carry on.
But yeah, like cutting down to seeing that kind of thing happening, like I said, it would have been so apt now.
I've remembered what I was going to say.
Okay, go.
First of all, I suppose obviously it's budgetary. Yeah. But second of all, I suppose on the counter side to that is potentially the reason why they didn't do those like cutaways to the Earth and show people like not realizing all this stuff is going on and just kind of
being
going with it.
Being influenced by it.
Is because it shows you, it sort of gets you to understand how subliminal it can be, because like showing it off on Earth would have made no kind of real impact because you would have just seen people sitting in front of the TV, like, whereas it kind of, like you said, it brings up that kind of political point in a much better way than the most recent series brought up political points of like, this is actually sometimes what happens, like, you know, how for a sort of prime example of recent events, how, and I hate him, so we're not going to mention his name, but how the big orange what's-it that controls America, when he talked about white people protesting the lockdown, it was, these are misunderstood people, they just want haircuts and blah, blah, blah. Whereas when it was black people protesting for their lives, he was their thugs, they're this, they're that. And it's that kind of
it's the right word in the wrong place, or the wrong word in the right place.
Exactly,
can
it's
influence
like,
people. I think that's what I mean.
That's what it's saying.
I know that obviously that as a hypothetical, in today's day and age is a reality, but like looking at it in the place of the long game.
Yeah, I suppose
Seeing that happening downstairs on Earth or on these colonies would have maybe made that threat feel bigger. It's because it's so confined to floor 500, quite literally.
I suppose
it doesn't seem so real. Like I said, you could shut somebody in a room and say, "Oh, that's going on outside," but if we can't see it, we don't feel the shockwaves back of it. Actually, of this society being tweaked and changed, they do it in such a way that they show something that, again, like we know is fact. End of story, something scientifically true that they're now questioning because the media have said so. Again, it sounds so apt for now in current society, but that's not important. But like seeing that happen, literally showing the power rather than just being an expositional thing of the editor saying we have control over people because they're thick and they'll do as we say.
Yeah.
Seeing that seeing that happening maybe gives you more want for the Doctor and Rose to succeed. Not that you don't anyway, because it's Doctor Who.
It's Doctor Who. But I see, it makes
the threat feel thin. But that might just be me.
Yeah,
but like,
I mean,
when I say cutting away, I mean think of the end of series 2 when you've got the threat at the end of series 2 flying through London and shooting down to people below, and you just see people below being shot. Just cutaways like that, just things like that to show that that's actually happening to normal people. That makes that threat feel tangible.
I mean,
that's
I suppose
all
it's kind of like.
Needed. And again, it could be budgetary, as you said.
Yeah. In this episode, I feel like you've got the main sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Threat. Let's just call it a threat of the Jagrafess itself. Obviously, they made this kind of scary looking blob with teeth, and like he himself. Or it itself, I can't really call it a he.
The editor calls it a he.
The blob itself, we'll go with. The blob itself is kind of like a threat, but other than to obviously their goal, I suppose their goal is to. This is why it's called the long game, isn't it? This is why the episode's called the long game, because. What is their goal? Their goal is to enslave the human race without the human race realising. But why? Like, what is it just so that they can be like, we own the human race? Like, what benefit does that have? Like, what, like, pushing your viewpoint onto people, what benefit does that have if you're not aiming for, like, a better... I mean, obviously they are deluded and think that their way of living is a better way of living. But, like, what I just don't... And I suppose that's kind of why it fights itself, this episode, a little bit, because the reason they don't cut away to anything going on Earth is because it's not really a threat from the point of view that we would expect a threat in Doctor Who to present itself. Like, that's why they have the scary Jagrafess monster, because that is the threat that kills people when they get promoted to floor 500. And that is what we need to be more focused on in this episode, because it is the tangible thing that puts the Doctor and Rose in danger. Like, a threat of just enslaving the human race without them, like Simon Pegg says, it's a very philosophical question, or he was hoping to have it a very philosophical question. Is a slave if they don't know they're a slave? Yes. I mean, obviously, yes. Yeah. But, like, it is that kind of question of, like, if the human race weren't aware they were enslaved, they're all just kind of living day to day and sort of getting on with things and whatnot. Like, the episode fights itself on that front, because you need that tangible threat for the episode to seem scary. Like you said, it does bring it down to a kind of smaller thing. But then in that instance, cutaways to the Earth wouldn't have really mattered, because it would have just been people living day to day, and it wouldn't have really it wouldn't have mattered.
No, you made a really good point.
So I suppose that is kind of, you've almost got two enemies and a third underlying plot device, really, as opposed to a threat.
But you're right. Like, what is the Jagrafess's final mission?
Goal.
What does he want to do?
It's just, I don't know. Maybe they're setting them up to sell them. Or...
Maybe he's a mirror to Adam. He just wants to be powerful. He just wants to have that big. He wants the I have a gigantic dick syndrome of just look at how good I am at these things. There's nothing that says we're gonna take the human race and we're gonna yeah, as you say, we're gonna blow the earth, but we're gonna sell it. We're gonna make them mine a big. They're gonna mine to the core of the earth so we can turn the planet into a spaceship, like the Daleks wanted to do in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
unlike the Slovene, who were very clear about their intentions.
Knew exactly what they wanted to do. The Jagrafess just kind of feels. I think the way that they, as you say, they put a physical monster there because it needs a monster because it's Doctor Who. But the reason why we believe we should have a problem with it is because it's different from the norm that we know now.
Yeah.
So that does technically make it a tangible threat from the viewer's perspective. Mm-hmm. But within the canon of the universe, within the world of year 200,000, then that's their way of life. You're right. They don't realize they're being manipulated this way. We don't know whether we're being manipulated that way.
Oh my god!
Oh no!
Boo! Mind blown.
But yeah, it's definitely interesting as to what the Jagrafess's final goal really was. It is fascinating. I think that's probably why the episode is sort of like not massively not so much look back on fondly, but it's not an episode that you go back to and think, this is really good.
When you think about it, not really a lot happens.
No.
Like, really not a lot. Like you said, the main sort of crux of this episode is Adam and his stupidity. Because if you take Adam out of the episode, what actually happens is they realise it's a bit hot. Suki gets promoted and don't come back. And then they fiddle around with the pipes. They go upstairs. Kafka realises what's going on and, saves the day. That's it, isn't it? Without Adam's stupidity. And so I can see why they brought him along for the ride in this episode, because they needed something to fill in the time with. Which is a sad way to look at it, really, because I think the episode as a whole does work really well. Like, it is...
It's not at all a bad episode.
Oh no,
as you say,
not by any stretch.
It's just a bit thin.
But I mean, I really enjoyed the fact that Simon Pegg was in this episode. He plays the editor, so I mean, he's obviously a fantastic actor. But he does play his role very sort of well, very
the thing I'm fascinated about with Simon Pegg in this episode, is he wearing contacts to make his eyes bluer?
Yes, I think he is, because I did think that as well. I looked at it and I was like, his eyes are not that pale, surely.
They are so bright.
But it's because he's got the white hair, because he's obviously I don't know, is he human?
He's human, yeah. He said that he represents Banks. I bet he's... Again, it kind of comes across as another sort of Adam-esque character of the, Kent Brockman seeing the ants in the spaceship when Homer goes to space. And he's the first person to say, if you want a news anchor that can help get people in line for you, I'm your man. Simon Pegg's character, the editor, whatever his real name is probably the same thing. Jagrafess rocks up and he's like, if you spare my life, I'll be your pet.
Bitch.
I'll be your bitch, basically. It's like in Gravity Falls when Bill Cipher rocks up and Mr. Northwest, who's just a very wealthy but ultimately a massive pussy of a man, just says, I'll help you if you want someone to represent you on the human side, then I'm here. It's like Dr. Breen in Half-Life 2 being the administrator to the Combine. He's that kind of character. Yeah. So he's human.
But then also, doesn't that sort of add into when he excuse me, when he says about I represent the banks and their investment, like the Jagrafess and all that jazz, is that their game, is basically just money? Because obviously
everyone's game is money.
Obviously, but we were saying about we didn't understand what their goal was, but I suppose their goal is just to be rich.
I guess it's like a case of, if we don't take this offer almost from this big blob that's probably gonna, I don't know how on earth it might have gotten into that position. We can screw over the plebs, and we can live like kings. We're still within in an oppressed society, but at least we'll have the nice houses, and we'll be the ones with the money, provided that we just keep funding this approach to society. Because they said Satellite 5 started broadcasting 91 years ago. And that's when the Jagrafess must have been installed. So it's like this. I've always
quite liked that scene where the Doctor goes, humanity's off by about 90 years. When did it start broadcasting? She goes, 91 years ago. That was her realization point of something wrong.
Is happening. But again, there's a lot more behind the sort of motivations of where this really began. There's still a lot of empty things, as we said, like the idea that this is happening to us living in current society, or 21st century society know that this is not how things should be, as much as there are people out there who already think this is happening. I said it could be, we just don't know.
Sadly, we're never going to know.
I hope they don't hear this and come and find us.
Please don't kill us.
Because we've worked it out. We've solved the mystery.
We're in a simulation. Life
We're now going to be invited to the Illuminati because we worked out the puzzle.
Lol,
That's how that works.
Nah, I'm alright. I'll just stay at home and bake cakes, thanks.
That sounds cool. But yeah, Simon Pegg's character is interesting, and I like. He seems like such a strong character, so sort of. He believes in what he's doing.
Yeah,
he doesn't feel so much like he's in a, almost, as he puts it, like a slave position in himself.
Nah.
Like, he seems to be pretty game for it.
Yeah, and this is the thing with a lot of people that are in this position. This is what I said, they truly believe that what they're doing is for, like, the greater good, shall we say, to quote, like, Crimes of Grindelwald and whatever you want to say. Yeah. It's like, you know, the greater good is one of those things that a lot of people who ignorance is bliss, and it's like you genuinely think that what you're doing is because that's the right thing or whatever, that's going to cause a hell of a lot of issues, and he genuinely believes that what they're doing is the right thing. And therefore he doesn't really care what it takes to get him there. Like,
but then on the flip side of that, if he believed so much in what he was doing and he would see it through to the bitter end or lager end, to quote Simon Pegg in another film. I'm sorry, I had to. Why would he just run off at the end? I know that he wants to preserve his... And obviously, I know he doesn't want to die. I get that. But I'm kind of like... That says to me that he wasn't all in it.
See, I think... No, personally, I think he was in it for the money and in it for the power and in it for the things of, like, I am in control of the... You know, and obviously, you know, because you see him, his character sort of flip back and forth between I'm in charge controlling these like dead humans and the control panel, and then all of a sudden the Jagrafess will say something and he'll be like, yes, sorry, of course, I meant that. And it's kind of like he wants to be in control, but he can't because the Jagrafess is just about like in control over him. And it does make me wonder whether Jagrafess was slightly in control of him as well without him realising. So really what he's like, I'm not a slave, but actually you are, and it's all irony. But it's like he probably wanted to escape right at the end so that he could preserve what they'd built on this thing. Because, I mean, there's no reason why this now couldn't work without it. Could it work without the Jagrafess? That's what I'm wondering. Like, because the Jagrafess is kind of like this all... Is he like this all-seeing thing, or does he just
the editor says when he introduces the Jagrafess, the Doctor says like his wisdom and stuff is shaping and directing the human race. So it's obviously like this thing is clever, but like he can be a big blobby idiot, but there are moments when he knows what he's doing. So
could this work without him? Because he's not essential to the creation of this.
Could it work?
Could it work? So maybe he's thinking, if I can get out of here with my life intact, I could carry this on after the Doctor leaves. And thinking he's won, and therefore I can still have all the investments and I can keep it all for myself, and therefore I would be fully in charge of everything going on. So that's probably more the reason why he tries to escape at the end. Perhaps, yeah. Obviously you don't want to die as well, but like... True. Yeah.
But like, yeah, could we get rid of the guy at the top and this could keep going? Like, I know what we're doing. Like, we this is something that just works. You don't like you upstairs. You don't need to keep chiming in. We're good here. Yeah. Like, just let us do it. Basically. We know what we're doing. But again, we again, that's not something we really know exactly how much that like is conveyed. Like, as much as far as we're aware, the Jagrafess is in control of the dead people working the desk, including Suki, because hence why she grabs him as he tries to leave, because I'm assuming that's the Jagrafess controlling her, because as the Doctor says, Suki's dead, she's not left, it's just the chip, so that's why she grabs him, which I think is kind of appropriate given that it's like she was the last one to die. It's like, it's Suki's revenge in the end after all. Is that the Jagrafess working through them, or does he just have the control to say, you just do as the editor tells you? Like the subconscious almost sticks there, because obviously the editor's talking to those people saying double check, triple check.
Yeah.
How many times does it say check during that? It's a lot.
Oh my god, I love that bit. Just as a side point, I love that bit when he goes along. What is there, like 5 people, and he goes check, double check, triple check, quadruple check, and then he gets to the last person. He just does a hand gesture.
He just like a handshake.
I haven't got anything.
And you could tell he was having fun. It must have been really hard for those actors to stay deadpan when you got Simon Pegg, who's a fantastic actor and a really funny guy, like doing this. And obviously Simon Pegg being a massive, like, he's a huge Doctor Who fan and a big sci-fi nerd, hence why, you know, Spaced existed and he got to be in Star Wars and all sorts. Like he was really excited to do that, to play that role. So that, it must have been interesting on set. But there's so much to pick apart from the long game. It's not so.
It's a bit weird because not much happens, but actually a lot is said in like
a lot is said. A world is established, but obviously this is something we'll get to later this series. But this episode actually sets up the end of the series, the
finale. Yeah,
the world the Doctor has created. It's almost like a realization that as much as the events of this episode, bar the Jagrafess being blown to smithereens, most of this isn't really that necessary. But that particular point right at the end, that's what changes where things go. Yeah. And obviously we're not gonna reveal spoilers. What happens. Again, if you are new to this series, you're new to Doctor Who, then we're not gonna spoil things for you. That's why whenever I've jumped ahead to things, I've been vague as to what's happening, just to sort of get Amy to understand, and also anyone who's listening who knows Doctor Who will understand what we're referencing in the future. But that is the long game, which, you know, we're like almost bang on halfway through the series now. 13 episodes in the series.
Yeah, because I turned to you this morning, didn't I, and said, when is Father's Day, which is actually the next episode. Yes. Which I had to phrase in a different way because I thought if I'd have said, when is Father's Day, you'd have gone
like last
weekend.
Week.
Yeah, literally. But yeah, so I was like, when is the episode Father's Day? And you said, oh, it's next. And I was like, oh, how many episodes have we got to go? And you listed them off. And I was like, have we really got that many left? Of series 1? It's
because, as you said, we're so used to modern Doctor Who series 12 and 13, series 11 and 12 being 10 50-minute episodes rather than. Admittedly, it was 13 episodes, and then I think it was dropped to 12 for Moffat.
Yeah, I know.
And then down to 10 for Chris Chibnall. So yeah, we're just over halfway through the series now, and I said we'll do a series / Doctor rundown at the end.
Yeah.
So basically, there'll be 14 episodes of this podcast in series 1. But next week, it's Father's Day, which is one of those episodes which is more interesting for Modern Who because it focuses so much more on family. Which, as we said before when we talked about Aliens of London, we don't see that so much in Doctor Who. But this is the first episode. I say the first. It's not really the first, but it's one of the episodes that is so much heavily. The exploration of family is a lot heavier.
But also,
again, I'm not going to get too overboard talking about that because we'll save that for next week.
Also, it's going to be the kind of first introduction to the Doctor's mantra, which is some points in time are fixed and some points in time are flexible, and we get to see like the sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Like the kind of standard trope of time travel in Father's Day. Of
paradox.
Yeah, paradox. So like if you go back and change something, how does it change the future? Like that episode of The Simpsons we were watching literally like 2 days ago where Homer has the time traveling toaster.
Horror. Yeah.
And it's like he kills a mosquito and then all of a sudden everything's changed. So we get
Ned Flanders is the supreme leader of the world.
Again, it's like, you know, the Doctor
exploring
people,
fixed points in time.
Well, I was going to say giving the audience the ability to understand why he's so serious about fixed points in time in the future. But anyway, that's all a discussion for next week. I don't want to get too far ahead
We'll talk about that next week. But until then, thank you all very much for listening.
I can't believe it's been an hour already.
Watching on the it's just shy of an hour.
Yeah.
Everyone who's been listening and or watching on the YouTube version, if you have any questions for next week, please let us know in the comment section.
I was going to go through and have a look and see if there was any questions for.
Or you can tweet us at WhoCulture using the hashtag escaping Kasterborous, and you can find me on Twitter at pickupchangetoe, and you can find Amy
at Ames_Elizabeth.
But until then, get ready for Father's Day. We're a bit late. Like we were quite close. If we'd started this series like 2 weeks before we did, we'd have watched Father's Day on Father's Day,
which would have been
very
quite cool.
But not. I mean, never mind. We started this podcast finally because we got the Who Culture channel underway. But until then, have a fantastic week. Take care. Hope you're all doing well.
Enjoy.
Thank you all again for listening. It's hugely, hugely appreciated. But until then, we will see you next week.
Goodbye. Bye.